every time we've done videos, she starts it off with something off the wall. Like at one time, she starts. No, wait, she started it. Little Einstein. Just little Einstein. She went on. I was cracking herself up. What's wrong with you? So this time, I was like, okay, 3, 2, 1. All of a sudden, she picks up one of those little recorders, like you hear they play in school. Starts playing it. So then I was like, okay, you know what? And finally, then she said, I want to do this game. I want to do this. If you get over 650, I will let you have some of that money for spending. Okay? And that's where she started coming from you from Sun City or all. And I didn't want to like stop her because she was like there were like 4 different videos. The one right before that she goes, this is a book party. I'm out selling books. But the thing that was killing me though was when she threw them, I was like, oh yeah. And the dog was like literally right there. I'm like trying to video but like grab it before she took it. Speaking of, can you tell me? Did I tell you about this? We were trying to decide if we should do this buffet with a character meet and greet.
Do you need those?
Because they have Marvel characters. And we have this huge Spider-Man. So we were like, and there's two of my Spider-Man. I thought you didn't have to do that. I was like, okay, does he know the other ones from X-Men? She's like, and he walks in at that moment, she's asking, hey Andrew, Wolverine is, and he looks at me like I can do the third eye. So, okay. Spider-Man. I'm expecting it next week. You know who Spider-Man is. All right. She goes, keep going. Okay, you know who Captain America? And he gives me his name. I'm like, the Hulk. First man. And he goes on, and there's a couple I thought I would have him on, like, what's her name? Scarlett Johansson's character. And he gives me her name, and I'm like, he's like, Roma. Sorry, I really, but, okay. And this one, I wasn't sure if I could get him on this. I'm like, who's Thor? And he's like, Thor's thing. He's looking like, and so he tries to go, he's like, Thor, wherever he's from. And he's like, Thor of, and I can think of what the name was, Shardell. And I'm like, Mom, that's Frozen. I'm like, he can name all these, but I asked him if he like chicken nuggets or hot dogs, and he can't give me an answer. Nuggets are all. That's funny. But you feel like, oh, what? So we decided that, well, anyways, for kids are 2, 5, and 7. So we thought this is going to be a much, because it's got the whole little Dr. Seuss, the other ones, and then my kids will do the other stuff, as long as they do something Harry Potter. So, and Kelly's kids are 12, 14, 16. So, we're the only ones going out to me and my kids. And Nathan's got a friend coming down with her, so I feel like she'll probably let them go and do their thing.
Do you have when you did Butler, that might be it. I know when we got there, there was something, and it was
Great life.
animated map, like a true map.
Oh, really?
Like, I want to go to whatever. And then it will tell you, go up, blah, blah, road, turn right. I don't know what blah, blah, blah is. So, I don't know what the numbers are.
If I could have your attention.
Well, you think so? You don't mind a lot quicker.
Are they making bunny ears behind me? I'm just wondering. I have the great pleasure to just introduce to you, first, before our panelists, I want to introduce you two very special ladies. Kathy O'Reilly is here, and Janet Weisner is here to represent the Inclusion Network. And they want to just say a couple words to you about the work that they do in our shared mission. Good afternoon, everyone. It's always good to have a friend. Janet and I are principals. I'm at St. Brigid.
I'm in St. Catherine.
And we have been working with SPICE programs at our school for years and years and years. You're going to hear more about SPICE in a little bit, so we won't talk about that right now. But as an offshoot of SPICE, Janet and I have been working with teachers and principals under the umbrella of the Catholic Inclusion Network, which has been
funded by the Catholic Foundation. And we've been trying to work on professional development for teachers in the area of special learning needs of all types. And also with compiling resources on our website with a long time range plan of working with parents and religious ed catechists. So this is our very, very, very part-time job at the Inclusion Network. So I'm going to let Janet fill in a little bit more about it.
So during this time this year, we have offered professional development to our teachers, our intervention specialists, and principals. This will be our fourth program, is that right? Fourth program in April, and it really is focused on how we can work with children in our classrooms, what that looks like as far as design, what kinds of opportunities are available, and this last session is going to work on behavioral, emotional issues that we see ongoing with our students and our children coming into schools these days. So that's part of what the Catholic Inclusion Network does, is provide these professional development. And as Kathy said, and then looking down the road, we want to extend this into our parishes too, because our SPICE program, which Mary Jo will talk about, really is for our parish. It's for our school and it's for our parish too. So I know in ours, and I'm sure in yours also, children that are in their PSR programs access the SPICE money, and so it really benefits all of us, and we're hoping to extend that type of services to people in the parish and PSR programs, that they can access materials and resources and invitations to come to some of these professional development that would be appropriate for the people within your own parishes. So we're excited to have, we're pleased that the Catholic Foundation has helped us with this, and all of the materials, and Kathy did this really nice little card for today that gives you our website here, that if you want to just get in there sometime and take a look, because there are a lot of resources just about children and learning issues, and that you might find helpful to you at this point in time when you're working with children in your own parishes.
So the resources were given to us by Loyola University, and they include pastoral letters and USCCB resources. So that's a handy place that you can go to find those resources too, and how to work with children with learning disabilities. So these cards are over on the resource table. It has how to contact us and our web address. So thank you very much.
Thank you, ladies. I'd also like to introduce to you now Maria Phillips. Maria works in the Office of Catholic Schools, and she is the Associate Director for the Office of Special Relations, Special Populations. Thank you. And so tell us a little bit about what you do and how you work with this group.
So at our office, Special Populations is a very broad umbrella. It will include any student with any kind of a special need, up to and including gifted students, up to and including English learners, up to and including preschools. So it's just a lot of different areas. I'm available at the office if people have specific questions to call. I can direct you to resources. We have some resources in office that we can lend out. One of the things I do the most is being in schools or going into schools and advocating for parents or for students with districts. And oftentimes the legality of what districts do and don't do and how they interpret law, which can vary from district to district to district, is very different. And so I can go into a meeting and sit at a meeting with a parent and advocate on behalf of that student and on behalf of our school, saying, no, this is really something that should be being provided for this student. Taking on some of the laws and how the laws are being interpreted and carried out, sometimes very incorrectly. So that's some of the stuff that I do in our office, but I'm glad to talk to parents if they have students in public schools and they would like to get them into our Catholic schools, about the special needs scholarships that we have here in Columbus, and ways that they can do that. I help principals that are starting out and are new principals in buildings that like to come on in and make their school
so much. In this effort to promote awareness, it's so important to just sometimes put faces with names and to know who are the people that you can contact and reach out to for your ministries. And so our next session is our panelists, who thank you so much for being here today. We're going to have 15 minutes of conversation with each panelist as they present, and I'll go through and let you know today, please help me in welcoming Msgr Hendricks. Msgr Hendricks is the pastor at St. Brigid of Kildare. He's been a priest for 47 years, and he and I have worked together for several years on sacramental masses and helping people with special needs and disabilities. So he'll be speaking to us today about the pastor perspective. So Ginn Ryan is a parishioner at St. Catherine in Bexley. She is one of the co-founders of the ministry that you all know as Spice. Together with her husband, they have 11 children, and she can speak to you about the mission and ministry of Spice. Allison Shardell is the DRE in Newark, and in St. Leonard and Keith. Okay, and so Allison and I work together in a lot of different capacities. She has founded different ministries within her parish. Your list is very long. So Allison is one of the facilitators for the VLCFF group that we spoke about earlier, and Allison can speak about forming ministries within your community and leading DREs in times of question, and just we'll speak to that DRE perspective. Butler is here as a parent, so you're going to wear that hat, although you wear many different ones. And so Mark is able to speak about the perspective that parents and how parents play a role, and how parents can work together with the directors of religious education and with the pastors in the parishes. So thank you. Please welcome our panelists.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mark Butler, and professionally, I work with the Dominican Sisters of Peace, and then also I am also DRE a Holy Spirit parish. So those are the other hats that I wear. I'm here today to wear the hat of parent, a hat that I've worn for 23 years with my 3 kids. Now, you all are familiar with sayings that are kind of universal. Let me give you an example of one. If it's Ohio, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, right? And the weather will change. I do a lot of traveling for my job with the Dominican Sisters of Peace, and I was shocked to hear that they say the same thing in Kansas, and Kentucky, and Michigan, and New York. That is a universal saying. It's not just Ohio. Among the Dominican Sisters, there's another saying, and that is, if you've met one Dominican, you've met one Dominican. And so that is another universal saying you may have heard in other places, and I would like to co-opt that saying and say that if you've met one parent of a child with a disability, you've met one parent of a child with a disability. I'm not here to be a spokesperson for all parents. Although I do have 2 children who have been diagnosed with autism, I'm not here as an expert on autism either. I am an expert on my kids, and I am an expert on my story. And so that's what I want to share a little bit with you here today. I have a daughter named Katie. Katie is 22. Katie is on the autism spectrum. If you go by the current DSM-5, she's an autism level 2. Fairly high functioning, sweet young lady. And I also have a son named Andrew, and if you look in the Autism Awareness Month handout, my wife and Andrew are featured on the front of that. They're that beautiful woman and that handsome looking kid on the front page of that. They're mine. So Andrew is also on the autism spectrum. Andrew is level 3 because there is no level 4. He is very severe on the spectrum as you can be. Andrew is also diagnosed with a severe intellectual disability. And just to make things fun, he also has a couple mental illnesses. One of them is a mood disorder. The other one is a very exciting diagnosis. intermittent explosive disorder. Google it. Lucky us. And then Andrew also has a seizure disorder as well. Andrew is about to turn 21, and Andrew is nonverbal. So Andrew is a fairly severely disabled young man. I have been very fortunate that I have been very active in my parish community, in the diocesan community, and have felt many supports there. But we've had very different experiences of when it comes to being a parent of kids with special needs in the church. You heard presentations on the sacraments this morning and things about readiness and all that. Katie, I'm happy to say, is a very active member of our parish community. Katie is, the way her language developed, and those of you that are familiar with autism, you know sometimes language will develop in different ways. Katie very early on was nonverbal, but she had echolalia, so she'd say, and so we knew, hey, maybe there might be some language happening there. And then she developed her own unique language, where she would use phrases to describe what she meant. So if you were moving too fast, she would say, not like a cheetah, right? That's the way that she would say that. Matter of fact, one of her very first sentences, and I tell this story fairly often, if you've ever been to Holy Spirit or I think St. Peter's, there's a statue of the resurrected Lord over the altar. And one time when Katie had to leave Mass because of an incident where she bloodied my nose during the Gospel Alleluia, she hates singing, okay? As I was carrying her out of the church, she screamed, "Superman, save me!" That was a funny thing there that we still joke around about. But I'll never forget Katie's, one of her very first sentences that really sort of was not one of her Katieisms, but was a real one. And that was when our oldest daughter, Anna, was receiving her first communion. And when Anna went up to receive the Eucharist, I was kneeling and I was kind of holding Katie. And she turned to me and she pointed up at Anna and she said, "I want that. I want that." So that was one of her very first sayings, one of the very first real sentences that she said. And now, to this day, you can come to Holy Spirit, see Katie with joy receiving the Eucharist every time she comes to Mass. She still doesn't like the singing, though. And so when you're working with people with disabilities, a couple things to consider. When it comes to Katie, I would say our biggest thing is, you know what her favorite liturgical season is? No, knowing people with autism, there's a pretty good answer. Ordinary time. Right? Because during Lent and Advent and the other seasons, what do we have a tendency to do? Other stuff. Right? Everything's different. Katie loves ordinary time. Very few people raise their hand and say, "I love ordinary time." Katie does. And one of the things that she doesn't like at all is during the Easter season, Christmas season, the Holy Spirit, we sing the Our Father. Okay? Now, for you and I, it's like, okay, we're singing the Our Father, we know the tune. For Katie, that's kind of the equivalent of waking up and the sky being bright red instead of blue. So what do you do in that situation? Do you stop singing the Our Father because it's hurting someone in your community? I don't know. That's an interesting debate, maybe. But I will say this. One of the things that has happened is that Katie has a whole group of old lady friends. And now when we sing the Our Father, they surround her, and they hold her hand, and they say the Our Father, and they're there as a presence with her. And quite honestly, that's the best advice I can give you. My family, throughout our entire lives now, different times in our lives, we are worried and concerned about different things. A lot of you are dealing with school-age parents, and that's very much the focus of your ministry and your work. But from the moment a child is diagnosed, and that grieving period, that parents are in real need of support, that diagnosis, to the education, hey, my kid's 7 or 8, are they ever going to be able to do their sacraments? Am I able to get my kids into a Catholic school? Very different set of concerns. To now, as a parent, what I'm facing is a new set of challenges. My son has now made his first Holy Communion. And I'm a DRE, okay, that's tough. Because I've had lots of people say, oh, just do it, it's okay, just do it. I understand the document, I understand my son. To be very honest with you, if I had a jar of water here and a thing of paint here, Andrew wouldn't be able to distinguish between the two. He would think the paint looked good and he should drink it. He's not able to identify the Eucharist as special food. He doesn't meet that requirement. I'm no longer, Sacraments is not a focus of my family any longer, other than just making sure we're welcome and active in church. But for me, the next question in the reality is, I'm going to outlive my kids. And we live in a world that is not particularly welcoming of people with disabilities. We live in a world that does not value, especially people like Andrew, people who are nonverbal, people who are just very different. Pay attention when you're at the mall, when you're at the stores, and you see people in communities, the way that they're treated, even the way sometimes the people that are working with them are treated. Throughout my advocacy efforts for Ohioans with disabilities, our story's been covered in the Columbus Dispatch extensively. Just Google Andrew Butler, Autism, Ohio. Whole coverage in the Dispatch about our family, videos, you name it. We actually had people comment on one of the articles about Andrew, saying that, oh, people like that should just be euthanized. There's no way someone like that could ever be happy. That's, again, my concern now. My kids were little, I was upset about the diagnosis. I was struggling with that. I needed pastoral support. When my kids were approaching that, what we traditionally call the age of reason, my concern was the sacraments and integrating them in the religious life of the church. Now my concern is for tomorrow. And so as you're dealing with parents, it's the one thing I would caution you. One, if you've met one parent, you've met one parent. Two, if you have a child with a special need in your program, the best answer is not necessarily, hey, mom or dad, you could be the aide for your kid in their classroom. I've been told that many times. Believe me, sometimes I needed that hour and a half, right? Sometimes it's something is overwhelming the family, even at Mass, and they just need a group of people to surround them with love and care and support. But also, what I need now in this phase of my life, someone who's willing to be an advocate with me. Someone who's willing to say, you know what's going on is not right. It's not right that thousands of parents in Ohio of severely disabled kids are surrendering custody to get treatment. That happens here in Ohio. Most people aren't aware of that, but it happens every day. And so maybe what you can do is, you know what, you've got kids in your program, that's great, do it, that's wonderful. But maybe just that little effort to take some time to write a letter to your representative or senator to say, you know what, we want to fix things, we want to do better here in our state. But it's being willing to talk, to learn more, to be a partner, to keep that promise that was made at baptism to love. And to say wherever you're at, whether you've got the little kids, the babies, the school-age kids, where you're worried about when your child's 50 or 60, how can I be an active part of that person's life and to make a difference there? I think my 15 minutes are up, and that went really, really, really fast. So I will pass the microphone.
Thank you for that, and I apologize for the voice. I've had laryngitis all week, so we're gonna ask for some Holy Spirit, and maybe Holy Spirit will allow me to have a voice for this. As I mentioned, I'm a DRE at St. Leonard and Heath. I'm also the mother of 4 children with special needs. Between them in our house, we have autism, mental illness, ADHD, dyslexia, and profound hearing loss, with a child who only uses ASL. So as many people who do get into disabilities ministries or in any sort of disabilities field, there's usually a personal connection. And with my personal connection, I was able to look around my parish and see that there were children who weren't involved. There were parents who left the church. And it was just as simple as if their child made a sound during Mass, and these are usually older children with special needs, they will make some sounds, or they'll flap, or they'll do something in Mass that gets stares. or these are the kids who weren't, no one knew how to integrate them into PSR, so they never made their sacraments. And so I'm noticing these things, even as in a small parish like St. Leonard, we have, I think, about 300 families. These were things that I noticed that had gone unaddressed. And so I wanted to, because my background is in special education, I wanted to make sure that that wasn't going to be an issue at our parish. And so the first two things, or the first thing that's important to know is, as a DRE, you have two responsibilities. You have to help others develop a relationship with Jesus, and you have to facilitate meaningful experiences. And those meaningful experiences have to give people the opportunity to encounter Christ. That's it. You don't get to judge who gets to make those experiences. Your job is to facilitate them. So one thing that I ask parents, regardless of whether or not their children have special needs, is how, and we try to get the children involved too, because ultimately they know the answer to this, how can we make these experiences meaningful? How can class be meaningful? How can the sacraments be meaningful? Are there things we can do to help? Because even a lot of the things that we do in our parish are good for all kids. We have just implemented like flexible seating and fidgets, and making sure that our rooms are there's less visual stimuli bombarding the kids, because this is good for all of them. It helps them all focus. It helps them all find some meaning in the sacraments and in the program. One of the things that is a huge barrier to probably every parish, but especially the smaller ones, is that special needs programs can be expensive. As I mentioned, one of my children only uses ASL. Our parish in no way can afford an interpreter to come out every week. And so we have to work around these kind of things. A lot of the times, some of these special needs programs that I'll see, the cost to implement those programs are more than the budget that I have for my entire program. So for several years, I've been adding little by little by little, just trying to build up a program. And I think for most parishes, that's probably going to be a little more feasible than saying, we need to start a special needs program, we need interpreters, and we need this and this and this and this. And that's probably immediately going to shut down the conversation. So the way that, and this is not going to, I don't know if it'll work for all parishes, but I'm going to give you what we did so that perhaps you can take something that's useful back to your parish. As I said, we started with small steps. And the first step turned out to be the biggest barrier of all, is attitude. Until the early 1980s, a lot of people with disabilities were institutionalized, or they didn't go out into the community because they weren't accepted. So the reality of a lot of our parishes are that coming face to face with people that have disabilities that aren't in your own family is still relatively new. People still have attitudes and biases that haven't been addressed, and it's not their fault. This is just something that they had not experienced. And so we had to first start off with addressing biases and trying to change attitudes. And so it was something as simple as going into our bulletin and putting Autism Awareness Month in there, or Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month, or just little things, little bits of information that are easy for people to accept, easy for people to learn from, and make them want to learn more. Once their attitudes we started to change attitudes, and people started to see the importance of it. We were able to take, and this, borrow this off the table. This is an excellent resource, and there's 2 pages in here that were really helpful for our parish. The first one, try to hold this open, is the Signs of an Open Door Parish checklist. I went through every part of this checklist to see where the barriers were in our parish. Because in some things we were already doing well. We already had accessible bathrooms, for example, so that's not something we had to worry about. But this gives you everything. Like, are you even aware that there's people who have mental illness in your parish? Are you aware of people who are blind? Are you aware that there's people who are in your area, they're supposed to be in your parish, but they're not coming for one reason or another because of a disability? So this goes through pages of different things that can help you determine where your parish can do better. And after I did this, I brought this to my priest. I'm like, these are the things that we can do better. And I gave him some ideas of, these are some steps that we can take. We don't have to do this all today. There's no way to put a ramp up to the altar and change the front doors and get interpreters and all of this other stuff in 1 year. It's not going to happen. But it started a conversation. And so our priest was far more willing to have a conversation about what small steps can we take. Because you all have financial committees. They don't like big multi-million-dollar steps either. So having the conversation about taking small steps was really helpful. It got my priest on board. And one day he came to me and he really surprised me. He's like, I wrote a grant for you to the Catholic Foundation. I'm like, okay, for what? He goes, I want to be able to train people in our parish to do ASL. And if there's one person in this room right now who, it's not something that was expected out of him, but he had taken that to heart and he found the resources that we needed to do that. And so just having that conversation about this is what's needed in the parish can go a long way. And so we started to look up different resources that we could use. The Catholic Foundation is a big one. Every year they have a grant writing process where you can write grants for special needs programs, for curriculum changes, even something simple like in our parish, our TVs could not get closed captioning. So not only is that a problem for children who are deaf in PSR, but for the older adults who are in the social hall and they're socializing and everyone's watching the game, they don't have access to that. So one of the things we were able to do with grant money was to get TVs so that everybody had access. And we were able to get some of the materials that are on that table over there to allow our programs to be able to accommodate multiple disabilities. Some of these programs are designed just for kids with autism, but we found that they're useful for all of the kids. We use a lot of the visual aids that were specifically in the Finding God curriculum. We use them to help all of our second graders, because not everyone has a diagnosed special need or disability, but everyone can use some of these visual and hands-on things. So it was a way to integrate all children without necessarily saying, this is just for special needs right here. Instead, if we find a tool that works for one of our kids with a disability, we use it for all of the kids. Because what's good for one person, it could be useful for someone else, and you just haven't realized it at that point. Another resource that was really good for us was the VLCFF program out of the University of Dayton. And they mentioned it earlier, it's completely online, and so you don't have to go out to Dayton to do this program. But it was a good way to get some of the extra training from experts in the field to know how to start a disabilities ministry. And a lot of these courses, you have individual adults with disabilities who are helping to develop the program, who are helping to teach the program, or who are giving input. So I learned a lot of things. Like there was one class where I was facilitating. There was a teacher or a student in that class who says, I have a disability, and the one thing that bothers me is my parish always has a mass for disabilities. And so I'm like, oh, I've not heard that perspective before. What part about that bothered you? She said, it's the implication that I'm only welcome to serve at that mass. And so that was a light bulb going off. I'm like, we need to make sure that even if we have these kind of masses, that everyone knows they're welcome at all times to be a Eucharistic minister or a lector. You don't have to just wait until this mass. That everyone is welcome to serve at all masses. And then the third resource for us was sometimes we use other parishes in our diocese as models. We saw what they were doing, what helped what they thought that they needed to do better with their programs, and then I used other denominations. For example, the Lutheran Friends of the Deaf program is in Indiana. They do liturgical sign language training. It's not for professional interpreters, it's for people who know some basic sign language, but they want to learn how to interpret in their church. So they'll have a 3-day weekend where you can go in and learn that. They also have children's Bible stories in ASL that are, you play it on DVD. It's a child signing the stories and the songs. And so when you can either read the story to your class, or you can just play the DVD, and all of the children in class are able to see the signs and hear the story. And so in the preschool class where we have a deaf child, it's my hearing children that are signing the songs in that class. And it's really good to see the hearing children being involved in the deaf child's language. And so that's really good to see. It's not just saying we bought these for this child. We bought it to make our entire parish more welcoming. Those hearing children, they now know how to sign "Jesus loves me," and that makes everyone included. And on that same note, just one of the last things I wanted to mention was we do a lot to increase visibility in our parish. So we started off by just having our first communion class sign a song during their first communion mass. That started to raise awareness that we can take these small steps to be more inclusive. And so they started by signing one song. And more children, after they learned that one song, wanted to keep learning more and more. So now we have children in our PSR program that call me in and say, can we learn an entire prayer? Or how can we greet a person who is deaf? And so that's drawing them in to be more welcoming, but it's also allowing the rest of the parish to see that it's not a burden to be more inclusive. It's welcoming, and it's quite easy to do. And in our parish, the deaf child is my son. And so we've had people who said, why do we need to go through all of this for a 5-year-old? And my response to them was, if you build this program, even if you don't think it's worthwhile for one person, if you build it, imagine how many other people will come through the door, because right now those doors are closed to them. So even if you don't have someone who's deaf or who's autistic or who's blind, having the accommodations in place opens the door so that they'll come through. Because right now, if someone doesn't have access to the liturgy or to the program, they're not coming in the doors. And I know that when I travel, I'll go onto the diocese of wherever I'm traveling. I'll go onto their website and find which masses are accessible. And so if your parish has the ability to take those steps and be accessible regardless of whether there's someone in your parish right now that needs it, the doors are open to anyone. And so I think that's my biggest piece of advice, is just do what you can to open the doors, and then people will come through them.
Mine is the pastor's perspective, and what you've heard from the first two panelists is a very personal and poignant reminder to the church at large. And I'm going to talk a little bit about strategic initiatives, and I want to let you know that when I was ordained a priest in 1972, there was nothing. There was nothing for people with disabilities. And over the last 5 years, the whole world has changed, and you're aware of that. But it's also changed in the church in terms of the strategic initiatives on many levels that are now taking place. We are all aware of the Protecting God's Children initiative and the strengthening of that initiative given the troubled times that the church has. We are well aware of the inclusive and inclusion network that Kathy and Janet have begun for the diocese. We are well aware that the Catholic Foundation has the resources, many of those resources still untapped, to address the strategic initiatives of the diocese, and specifically the strategic initiatives for people with disabilities and other challenges. It's much more difficult to be a pastor in a small parish without resources. And you've heard one woman's way of trying to address those specific needs and resources as a parish. But I think strategically, as we move forward with fewer priests and 104 parishes, the initiative has to be collaboration, it has to be inclusiveness, and it has to be welcoming on first a deanery level and now on a diocesan level. And as we move forward with all of those changes, it would be the hope of this pastor that all of those strategic initiatives with regards to personnel, with regards to finances, with regards to inclusiveness, with regards to welcoming, start to take place in the Diocese of Columbus. I'm in a parish of 3,200 families. And the reason that we have been so successful with regards to our first few steps in working with people with disabilities in our religious education program, in our school, and with adults, has little to do with me. It has had to do, for 25 years, with Mary Frank Cassidy, our DRE. It had to do with Tina White, who worked in religious ed. It now has to do with Andrea Kamanda and Kathy O'Reilly and their staffs that, fortunately for us, have the resources, have the funding, and have the networks, and that is the next strategic initiative for pastors in our diocese, to develop those networks inside the church, and as you have done in the ecumenical dialogue with others, to begin to address the issue of disabilities holistically and not piecemeal, because we can only do a few wonderful things if we do it alone. But we can do many, many more wonderful things if we do it together. The ADE Act, which has been in existence now for almost 25 years, has helped parishes in terms of accessibility. But that is only in terms of physical accessibility. Now we have to become the parish that welcomes all of the people, the child that cries out all during Mass, the person who needs hearing assistance and can't find it, the adult with mental disabilities who is an anomaly in our congregations. All of those things take place not because of the pastor, but because of the community. And it is the community led by our religious leaders, our priests, our deacons, our staff, that have to make those things come alive and be very, very much a part of what we're doing in our own worship, in our own ministry. The whole issue of the sacramentality, which everyone has addressed, are they ready for this sacrament or that sacrament, really moves outside of what the church is now asking us to do, to allow people to receive the sacraments because they are gifts, and not to hold them close as weapons to use, but as gifts to give. And that tends to be where the church is moving over the last 5 years and will continue to move forward. So we give those gifts not simply to children, we give them to adults. And we try to make sure that each and every person is receptive to the gifts that the church gives us. Those 7 signs that we have as a church are graces that are mediated in and through the church. And they're mediated that way because the gifts of Christ come to us that way. And everyone has an opportunity to receive them. And if we continue to be inclusive and collaborative with our congregants and with others, then those gifts strengthen the community. It builds grace. It allows people to do the things that some of you have only had to do individually. And it becomes a way in which the church can not only survive, but continue to thrive. Inclusivity in our culture is a big buzzword. And right now in our culture, that inclusivity is starting to be picked away at time and time again. And what we need to do, I think, as a culture is come to terms with that sort of welcoming. Can you exclude someone because of who they are? Can you exclude someone because of their color? Can you exclude someone because they don't believe ecclesially as you believe? Are there ways to be more inclusive? And when it comes to disabilities, in a parish of my size, you see everything every weekend. And then you have to begin to address those and make people feel like they are included. Fortunately, in the community where I serve, I've been very fortunate. I've been there a long time, and everybody kind of knows the operating model now. And we keep changing that and developing that. And I expect over the next 5 years that the changes we have seen over the last 5 years will continue to evolve. But the church will continue to shrink. It will shrink for these reasons, because there are few clergy left, and we need more. The resources are becoming much, much more difficult to maintain because of a cultural issue in our society that really doesn't value or respect and has contempt for, not only anger, but contempt for the life that we lead. And consequently, that works its way down to individuals who are not seen as acceptable. And that's why you saw the exclusion in our culture of people who don't meet the norm. And so consequently, you know, each and every day, our obligation and our responsibility is try to bring all of that together. I would say in the Diocese of Columbus, if we can do more inclusive training as well as cooperation among our deanery parishes, combine resources, and not only look to the Catholic Foundation to fund us, but to look at the other agencies in the community that can fund us. There's one in Franklin County called Centero. They have a program both for youth as well as for older adults. We've partnered up with them. That has been extremely successful. Why? Because they have heavy funding, because there's no charge to parishes, and because they provide services as well as resources. We do that in our youth, for our youth. We do that for our older adults. So you kind of have to be one of those people that is always looking around to see what's available, and then to try to seize the opportunity to make life better. In the church today, we will continue to develop those particular resources. I'm fortunate, I have a very large staff of very well-educated professional people with very good ideas who can tell me each and every day, we need to do this, not that, you're wrong. And I'm very happy to listen. So, you know, I think the role from a pastor's perspective with regards to disabilities, with regards to so many other things in the church is become the servant leader, become the humble person who listens, become the person who's collaborative, become the person who trusts the people who you have put in the jobs to do their work well. And that's pretty much what I know, and Mary Jinn's going to talk to you about SPICE.
Well, thank you for having me today. I'm very humbled by the stories we've heard. 25 years ago, our 11th child was born, Ginn Ryan, and soon after her birth, we were told that she had Down syndrome. And then, you know, like 15 minutes later, they told us, you know, you can institutionalize her. That's 25 years ago, and I'm lying in the, you know, hospital bed thinking, where was she going to be educated? That was my main concern. I thought, you know, institutionalized, there's no way for that. So we've come a long way in 25 years. But thinking about the education for 5 years as Megan was growing up, we did pros and cons about where to go. I remember talking to parents previous when I was much younger about their child who was deaf or blind and wondering why they didn't bring the children to church on Sundays. And they said because they can't see, there's nothing there for them. They can't hear. And it always played a part, you know, in the back of my mind. And then when Megan was born, you know, typically we're not affected by something unless by someone else's pain or suffering, unless we truly walk in those shoes. And we're affected. So, you know, the light bulb went on when Megan was born. I'm thinking, you know, here all these years I could have been doing something to help these people along. And so after 5 years, we went into St. Catherine's and asked the principal, what are the chances of Megan going to school here? And like the hand of God, she said to me, we've been waiting for you. So, now she went through our Elberton children, so she knew what she was up against. Okay? But she said, we've been waiting for you. We want this opportunity. She said, you know what, Megan will do more for us than we could possibly do for her. And you know what, at St. Catherine's Parish, in the school, the doors have been open, and not just because of Megan, because we realized that this wasn't a Megan issue. This was an issue and something that was important for all God's children and adults, and hence SPICE, Special People for Catholic Education. So Megan's through St. Catherine's, through Bishop Harley, just graduated from Ohio State, but SPICE continues. And we've realized that on the parish level, that there's just such an awareness of everybody that has special needs. And for the longest time, there are people out there now, parents, who want desperately to have their children, or their adult children, to come into the church and to be recognized and to be able to participate as members of that church. And yet they don't feel welcome, or for whatever reason. And so St. Catherine's has taken the opportunity to do, just small things. Even it doesn't have to be, millions and millions of dollars, but, a ramp to get into the gym so people can participate in fish fries and everything else, or large print missalettes, or we have a sign interpreter for the deaf. We've, through SPICE, one of our parishioners went to Bishop Harley, we paid for part of that interpreter there. So now you're probably asking, how do we raise money for SPICE? SPICE is typically and truly just for raising awareness that we are called